Yeah, hello everyone, and welcome on ArchiDiaries for our second live interview in this ongoing interview series, which has been titled as Interior Design and Innovation. I'm really excited to share that for our second interview today, we have Veeram Shah with us, an architect, a designer, and a founder of a multidisciplinary design studio called Design Dukaan in Ahmedabad, India. Veeram, welcome on ArchiDiaries.
Thank you for having me.
Before we proceed further, please allow me to introduce Veeram and his firm Design Dukaan. Veeram Shah completed his bachelor's in architecture from M.M.C.A. Pune. His sensitivity to design comes from his various travels to quaint old Indian towns, where architecture is not born out of rational thought, rather out of social context and cultural needs. Viram perceives design as fragments of collective experiences and observations from the mundane to the profound. His influences are never constant but unbiased, ranging from Gandhi, Raza, Kumar Gandharva to modernists such as Le Corbusier and Scarpa. Viram has been heading Design Dukaan for the past more than 7 years and taking projects of various scales from architecture, interior design to furniture. He's also a co-founder of Pod, Pieces of Desire, an artisan-based design studio exploring seamless transition between art and functional objects with a conscious attempt to promote locally made products. With this, I would like to invite Viram to share his screen and his presentation. Over to you, Viram. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just begin. Yeah, so I think, I was mentioned that I've never had any distinctions behind the kind of skills that I want to work or experiment with. This is a presentation that we had prepared uh, just, I think, 2 months back for a lecture. And I think I would want people to because I realized that the head is interior design innovation, but there are a lot of different scales. Uh, let's sort of focus on the concepts as ideas of where these thoughts have come from. Yeah, so this is something that I relate to very well. So Corbusier was very inspired by industrial forms, and there's a book called Aircraft by him, where it was very related that when he wrote that the head of the workshop is in touch with life in the middle of his machines and materials. The materials are around him, under his hand, hard or soft, bit of elastic, fibrous or crystalline, thick or thin. The workmen are constantly thinking about materials. The drawing, the plan by which these materials will be set to work is only a shorthand note of the intrinsic character. But the drawing of schools is without bone or sinew. It has neither facets, weight, nor energy. It is amorphous. And it's very funny that he's written this so long back. This is why architecture was destroyed by schools in the 19th century, and why new architects the work of rebels. I have always um, sort of questioned as to why should design happen only on a drawing board. I think the greatest joy is to be able to work with the materials yourself, to be in the workshop, be constantly thinking about how you can see the material in a different light. This is actually a very large architectural project that I just browsed through. It's something that we've not put out yet. This is a project that I've been working on for the last 9 years. And so, yeah, so when we got this project, we did 2, 3 designs, and we were very young then, and the client suddenly said that I don't really care if my house has an elevation. And that sort of stuck by me. There is a very beautiful Kabir Doha called Nirbhay Nirgun, which Kumar Gandharva has sung. And in that, so Kabir he's talking to God. So, he's telling God that, I will sing about your praises fearlessly. I will sing about your attributes. So, Nirbhay. But then he questions God that how do I sing like you're formless, you're colorless, you're odorless, you can't be heard or tasted. So then how do I sing about your attributes? It's basically a paradox, which sort of touches the fact that a spiritual journey is actually an inquiry into one's own existence. Um, and it is about realizing the true existence. So this is something that stuck by, and when we decided to sort of draw the plan, we had these simple, like we were working that time the whole time of a static and a dynamic. So there was a dynamic curve line that we put, and like a static line separating it with this whole pressure point, which I'll come to later. And I think this is a video. Yeah, so this is the outline, and then these are the pockets of landscape that we sort of fit in. We wanted the house to open out to nature on both sides. And then this is the build mass. So it's around 23,000 square feet home. And I will not get into the details because I want to touch on the process and the concepts more than just actually getting into the project. So this is, I think, around a year back. So they've started living in, this is an aerial view of the same. This is a video which I'll skip for now. So it's, so basically it's when you, at a human scale, when you enter the site, you don't realize that there is actually a space that is there. And so it was for me also, like it's been what 9 years of working this project, and we always thought that eventually, like I always measure things in a tangible and intangible, that the nature will take over the structure, and then architecture will sort of completely diminish. Yeah, so these are a few pictures that we had taken. This is the entrance door, and so we consciously decided to use only two materials. We wanted a harsh texture and a softer material to balance it. And there's a narrative around the structure where there's only one color that's used, which is a terracotta, which sort of leads you and sort of guides you around the house as you move about it. This, I think, is a video. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a very interesting story behind how the mandir. So we did not put any space for a mandir, which was something that the client told later, that we need to have one space for an idol. Can we just put it somewhere? So I was like, you can't just put it somewhere. So this actually the entrance with the waiting area, and so then I told him that I want the impact of a space which is sacred to be something. Now it's very interesting that we decided to do this cantilevered part that's coming out of the wall, and then we went to the engineer, and he sort of was he wanted to put a pin at the top to hold the structure, and it was very interesting. I told him that okay, it's God's structure, and you can't let it touch any of the walls. And so we figured out pile foundations where this whole structure was sort of cantilevering out. And then further, so when we were making this murti, I spoke to the artist, the sculptor, and I told him that I do not want to create God out of the stone. I want to create God in the stone, which is a metaphor because I'm an atheist, and I do have faith in the concepts of religion, but it was very interesting that that we carved the idol inside the stone, and as you move around, you can see the eyes following you. And these are a few pictures. So basically, we did the landscape, the interior architecture, everything you see in the frame is something that we designed. So as you move, there are pause points where this is like a court, and then it leads you to the rooms, the private suites. So this is also interesting. This is something that we'll relate to later. So we did not actually need the column there, but for the sake of symmetry, I told the engineer that can we have a column and let it not touch the floor. So when you start walking, the first thing is that the curiosity or the tension or the drama that, oh my God, that this object doesn't touch the floor. Yeah, a few pictures of the interior. So we designed the lights, the chairs, everything was done in-house. Yeah, this is 1 year back. It's after monsoon, it's grown so beautifully that the concrete walls have just disappeared. These are a few details. These are few bathrooms, very simple materials. We wanted to. It's a very big home, but we wanted to be very minimal with the way that we use the materials. So these are the guest rooms, which open out to the private landscape. So as you move further in the structure, you come to the most private parts of the house, which is the client's rooms. So small gestures like this, that the water seeps in and goes back to the earth. This is one of the bathrooms. This is one of the bigger rooms opening out to the pool. And interior becoming seamlessly a part of the architecture. This is same simplicity. So basically, the outline of the concrete wall is kept as it is. So when you move about the structure, you see it sort of follows you, it gives you a hint of its existence. This is the pool. So we had a very interesting conversation. One of my interns then. So pool. We have seen all pools to be blue, and then it was very predominant that we are using only terracotta as a color in the house. And then the question was that why don't we do a terracotta pool also? And I did not think the client would accept it, but after all these years, we had a nice conversation about it, and they accepted that, yeah, why not just have one color in the house? And it's actually turned out very beautiful. Yeah, so basically, the scale is diminished because a lot of the structure goes inside the earth. This is the service area. Few more shots of. This is an artist lounge that we did last. It's a very big project to explain in this point, but yeah. So we we have a circle of people who belong to different fields. Drupad Shukla is actually a filmmaker, and he said, "Why don't?" So when we spoke about Nirbhay Nirgun, about being fearless and formless, and then his point was that even a child is the same. A child is fearless and formless, and why don't we document this whole structure through the eyes of a child? And I said, why not? So it's a very short clipping of a larger film that you are making, but I'll just play it quickly. I hope it plays. Yeah. Sorry, I don't think the sound's fine, but I'll just go ahead. So yeah, so I belong to a town called Navsari, which is in south of Gujarat, a very small town, mostly Parsi dominant when I was there. Now it's shifted. But so yeah, I finished college in Pune and came back to Ahmedabad because my parents were here. And then we were not very sure as to what we wanted. With me and a bunch of my juniors, we had a group of people who were sort of thinking on similar lines. So I said, okay, let's get back to Navsari. That house was empty. My parents had shifted to, and let's try making smaller products. Let's try exploring. So my father, my father has been an antique collector. So he's collected these chairs over years, all these Parsi houses being broken down, and we started with documenting these chairs. And I said, why don't we document these chairs, figure out details, and do contemporary versions of these chairs? So this is actually how the design journey started. We would be working day in and out, we'd be talking about things, we'd listening to music. And then we started, the best part about, I think, where we have reached now is that we started working with our hands. And for the same reason, I know for a fact that it built a base upon which we have just sort of layered and layered to come where we are today. Yeah, so there's just few pictures of that whole space where we used to work. And then whenever we got the time, we would restore scooters, and it was a fun time. And this is the time you get out of college, and there's this whole thing, when your relatives come and tell you that, yeah, I have to do one room, can you do a room? And I have this thing where I decided I will never work with relatives. And I said, let us take this time, take it slow, and just figure out what we want to do. And I think that time it was essential to give that time to giving thought to what processes follow later. And then eventually bagged the architectural project. And then we realized that we have to have a space in a city. You can't work remotely. So this is a campus. This is my office where I'm sitting right now. We have this space where we probably have Garba in the next 2-3 days. And there's a gazebo, a small landscape part, and this is the main workspace. So yeah, these are some sections to it. Yeah, so this is what the office looks like. And with the circle that we had, we always realized that we would want the office to be informal. So we don't have work timings. The point is to sort of get your work done, and we don't have any designations. Everyone calls me Veeram, and it's basically you are valued for what work you can produce. Few details. So this is something we did later because I realized that I would want a space for my own, and because we did not have work timings, it was a small community. We would be working nights, people would be sleeping on desks. So then we realized to what is lacking. So we created this is 300 square feet. It's almost like a tiny bungalow. So we wanted a space for conversations. We wanted a mezzanine where someone could sleep in case they were working late. I wanted a space for myself. So yeah. So one second. I'm going to talking about a few things that I went through when I was developing what work I wanted to do. So I was introduced to architecture by Girish Doshi. Girish Doshi has a firm called Navsari based in Pune, and he had worked with B.V. Doshi for a very long time. And obviously B.V. Doshi had worked with Corbusier. So this whole modernism that sort of came into my life, where I found it very fascinating that things like surfaces don't have to be perfect. There is a certain nuance in how work happens. And so I read a lot about modernists. So this is Scarpa. This is the Rion Cemetery. So just few things to notice. So these are the graves of the couple who had commissioned him to do this. So it's you can see the harsh black granite with the softness of the white, and the metaphor that you have to walk down, and then a bridge, sort of bridging heaven and hell. And what I found very interesting was that he leaned both the graves towards each other. That even in heaven or hell, they are still together. So this is the Olivetti showroom. So staircase. Like, why does staircase have to be a staircase? It could take so many forms. It could hold. This is a very linear space, and the staircase is actually something that sort of holds the space together. This is something. So Scarpa worked on different scales all his life. He would not care what scales unless it was interesting to him. So this is a tombstone that he did for someone. Now I always found Jesus in this image, and then I realized much later that if you look at the form here, so if this is the navel and these are the hips, and you see this line coming, crossing the legs, so it's the Christ, the figure of Christ is actually embedded in this in a very abstract sense, that this is where he was nailed at the foot. Again, one more tombstone, and this made me realize how everything is so important, that if the font is not right, this is ZILIO, if the materials are not right, if I have a live going on. Yeah. Then this is Roger Anger. He's the architect who designed Auroville, Pondicherry. So just conceptual sketches of forms. And I always tell people to keep a diary. I mean, you never know what doodles work out into forms, and you can see how that's translated into shapes in the landscape. Similarly, you have a simple exercise of forms, and then how that translates into a commercial building. Yeah, this is Aura model. It's a community in Auroville, and this beautiful relevance of a very abstract sketch translated into concrete blocks. Yeah, this is what I was talking about initially, that creating tension. So Roger Anger would always imply the fact that he loves creating tension. So, he would have these huge columns not touching the ceiling. He would have voluptuous forms not touching the floor. And this is Boyle Marx. He predominantly worked in Brazil. He was a landscape architect, but he worked on various scales. So this is actually the Miami Boulevard. It's a plan, and this is actually how it looks like. And to think that this was happening in the 70s, and you look at urban infrastructure right now, and you see how it's almost like a painting. And then again, this is like a tracery for a synagogue, and you see how the shapes translate so seamlessly from a huge scale boulevard to like the smallest tracery windows, and yet the process and the art is still connected. This is him. He's worked on various mediums, again jewelry. So I think if you develop a process, you have to always realize that you don't have to confine yourself to being an interior designer or an architect. I think it's an intuitive thing that if I can design a cupboard, are the handles also that important? Or for me, it's almost like I think there's a thing that comes forward. But and then from this we came to execution of ideas. So from Bollmarks, we had done a lot of conceptual sketches. So this was a watercolor experiment, which is also on our website. Just random experiments, which was converted into like a mural in wood. And this is, I think, when he started this around 10, 11 years back. And then the actual experiment was that this was going to be translated in landscape in a shotcrete platform, where the red would become a seating, the empty white would become a place where the tree is planted. So same thing, seamless execution of different scales. And yeah, it's a video. So then we sort of took the lines when we made the website, and we sort of converted that into the identity. Yeah, so part to whole and whole to part is something that I believe in, that everything is connected. Like I said, like, is the knob as important as the shutter? Yes, I think the knob is what defines the shutter. Like, like Raza always spoke about the bindi and how important and powerful the bindi is. So when we made the website, we said, why don't we create all the icons out of parts of this whole mural? Then when I started, which I'm not a part of, when I started Dotto, these are exercises I did before I started. Can we adapt these forms into smaller objects also? And same things, that this is a canopy by Corbusier. It's the Chandigarh building. And then, that sort of seamlessly translates into 2 dimensions. And we study a lot of Corbusier's paintings also as to, because, what is an imperfect curve? There's no definition to a curve. But there is, when you make a process to sort of, I think the most difficult process is to study the imperfect. And then the imperfect, which is also graceful. So that is an ongoing dialogue with myself that I'm having for the last 10 years. So yeah, we try to convert this into chairs, and then, like the legs into a beautiful reception table. And then we would have exercise where we would interpret simple forms, like this is Surya Namaskar by Raza. So, Raza, in his later years, he lived in France for the most of his life. In later years, he was, when he came back, he changed his artistic style immensely, where the bindi became the most important, the bindu became the most important part of his work, where, so this is Surya Namaskar, which represents colors of the rising sun, and yet there is enough importance given to the black, to darkness, because that without that light wouldn't exist. And then this is something that, we could relate to, that Satyajit Ray is known for, he would direct, he would edit, he would do the costumes, he would do the font work. So it is so interesting that this sort of comes in different times and ages as you notice it, and then we would try to interpret that into different. This is something that we did long back, and then even more. Then like a trio of circles, simple things. Then we try to have the circle and expand on it in like a cylindrical form. As to can a cylinder also become a functional piece of um, yeah, then this is a skewed circle. So taking the geometry further, making it more abstract. This is a recent project. Yeah. And then this was a plan for a building that did not work out, but again, like a broken circle pattern. So, when we started, we would study the golden proportions because, we're very fascinated by Corbusier's work, and we would measure and draw these patterns. And I think after a point when you sketch enough, it becomes like, it automatically seamlessly flows that there is a certain proportion into what you draw. And I always tell people, always keep a sketchbook and keep drawing. So this is just sort of simple patterns converted into different objects, a cupboard, a reception table. This is actually a ceiling, yeah. And then on fabric. And then a mix, taking it further, have your patterns and lines and textiles and the bindis. Yeah. Yeah, so this is then giving it like a third dimension. So we always we always have a textile designer on board when we ideate things. So although the bed back was custom done for this project, then again expressing that same idea into like a huge flooring pattern. And this is something that I've been working on recently, that can we go beyond materials? Can we find that abstract? Can we get depths of material and expand and sort of deconstruct the properties of it? So this is, so there are some experiments we did with metals. And we were lucky enough to be commissioned this beautiful tile in brass. And then textiles. So then how does light filter through different textiles? There are hand-woven textiles. So you see these imperfections. And how do you sort of deal with that at a micro level? As this was eventually converted into a screen where the light would filter in different ways. And again, this is, I think, a top that we developed for a dining table. So then can we add the art, the textiles, and create something functional? Yeah, this is what it looked like eventually. And yeah, so again, when we designed this project, this was based on Wabi services long back, and we wanted everything to have a certain imperfection again. And then, so we got these stones cut on a machine, and then we called the mason to actually make the sides imperfect. And he was like, so why are you making me do an ulta process? But yeah. And again, for the same project, so me and the client, so Wabi Sabi was something the client came up with. And then when I read about it, I realized it's very close to what or how I think. So instead of polishing the wood, putting lacquer on brass, we decided to burn the wood. We decided to distress the wood. And we decided not to apply anything on it. And as what Wabi Sabi says, that it's imperfection and simplicity. So I told the client, you have to accept the way that the furniture ages. And if you look at this right now, it has taken a different form completely. I always have these arguments with clients as to you must accept the properties of the material. Again, some tactile experiments on a few pieces. This is in collaboration with Creo. They're doing very good work here in Ahmedabad. We've done these pieces where we use different materials to achieve the imperfections. And this is something that's very important for me. It's memories, because I grew up in a small town. It was a very laid back upbringing. And so, we would always have these Parsi uncles on the porch sitting on their chairs. And when this is actually the first design that I had done, I was like, why don't we modernize this concept of It's actually called a planter's chair. Yeah, then swings. No one was doing swings then because very traditional swings. And I said, why not have contemporary versions of these swings? So it's something we did for the project where you can have modular parts to the swing. You can place it as you want. Mm, yeah, and then these are a few interior projects where uh, complex details that you try to achieve. And then going, so this is a diploma project that we had a student who was into textiles, and her diploma project was to develop. She decided she wanted to reinvent old Indian games. So we worked with Brinda, who owns Mori in Ahmedabad, and we got all the fabric work done from few clusters of women embroidering around Kutch. One more experiment with that, and then so I did not know there's a 4-player chess, and so we designed this whole thing in a way that you could, when you turn the pieces, it could become a 2-player chess. When you turn the pieces, it would become a 4-player chess. So this is something I did long back, that why don't you have better designed bangle boxes? And then this is the intangible part of it, is what I spoke about Roger Anger, that I would always want that tension, that walls not touching each other, large cantilevers not being supported about the column. And yeah, this is a mural. This was very interesting because when we designed the staircase, it was this imperfect form which did not actually have a right curve. And then we were trying to sort of get people to do the mural separately and the chandelier separately. These three entities can't and that cut off one edge. And simplest, the stupidest things that sort of called I forget the name. It's a sci-fi film. I don't remember the name, but we saw this form and Arrival. It's called. I said, why don't we interpret that form into, let's do some experiments where we sort of, because there's something very, very graceful about the form, and then this table came up. And then I've been a big sci-fi fan, so this is Star Trek, and this is something I've seen growing up with my father. And then then you Star Trek and Scarpa come together to create like these huge, I think, cantilever tables we had done. This is Watchmen, so the sign on the head, and then that sort of seamlessly happened to be a knob. This is Star Wars, so same thing. You had Star Trek at the bottom, and you had these lights inspired from the speeders. And yeah, collaborations. This is what I spoke about earlier. That I think for me, collaborations are very important. That there is a community of people around us doing very good work in various fields. So this is by Brinda also, but her firm's name is Abstract. So we would मेरी ऑफिस में जो શું છે મૂકી દો ને અહીંયા હમ we would involve textile designers beforehand and give them a theme as to this. These are the exact tones that we want. Can we experiment with the quilts, with the pillows, with the bed sheets? And same thing. So these are the iterations that we did before we actually produced the games. And it was so nice that Sulakshana, the student, she could go with Brinda to all these clusters and actually work and understand everything at a grassroots level as to how does the stitching happen? Is block print possible? What are the shapes that are possible? This I'll just skip now. So Pod is my other brand. We do swings, but I think this is a part of the presentation. And again, so there's a very young kid in Baroda doing a bikes, and so we had a conversation. I was like, can we make a bike that is completely handmade? So except for the engine, we figured out a way that everything was built by hand. And then, so we have a lot of different people from different circles of life. So Hardik Dave is an artist, and so when I met him, I realized that being a Gujarati, I have not even 10% knowledge of what actual Gujarati literature is, and he's trying to promote literature in a way that normal people can understand. And I was very moved by that. And I was like, you have to make it accessible to people, that someone like me who speaks in English predominantly understands what these things were. And yeah, this is, I think, skip the video. Yeah, I think it would be more interesting if you sort of have questions or things that people would want to ask me. I think that it would be more. I thought it was going to be that format. But yeah, I think let's probably have a conversation about what was spoken. Yeah.
Thank you, Viram. I think after all these glitches, we managed to sort of have your interview and the presentation. It's always pleasing to see your work. Of course, we have been looking at it on Facebook and websites, etc. But it was very interesting to see from your own perspective as to how you see these various activities that your firm is engaged in, ranging from architecture,
Yep.
interior, furniture, and how all of this sort of ties together.
Mm.
And it's a very interesting model of practice where last Tuesday we had an interview with a Dutch firm that was Beyond Space, and they're also essentially a multidisciplinary design studio, but primarily they are actually an architects and interior designers, and their perspective was that we are getting into design because we get frustrated, at
Mm.
times we are working on an interior design project, and we want a certain kind of a furniture, and it's because you don't want get it something off the shelf. So we
Mm.
said, why not design it what we want, and that's how
Yep.
we slowly got into the field of design. But in your case, the story seems to be the other way around. You are not trying to differentiate between disciplines, where say like an interior design project doesn't necessarily means that you look at interior design as a separate entity, furniture as a separate entity. So starting from the door handle to the
Yep.
wardrobe to the furniture, everything is looked at under one larger umbrella. And
Yep.
that is, I think, a unique sort of approach to design in Dukaan. I just want to understand how at practice, because it's a very different kind of a mode of a practice. So on one hand,
Mm.
you are doing architectural projects, which requires a different kind of a setup. On the other hand, you are getting into furniture, which is kind of an entrepreneurial setup. What is the mode of practice that you with which you operate at Design in Dukaan?
Uh, so most of us here, the seniors, are architects,
Hmm.
and so there are people who have interned with us at some point. There are people who stuck back. So even so, I've always considered the studio as a finishing school. So even when they were here for 6 months, the conversations would never be limited to architecture, even if you're doing architecture. And there's a certain conditioning that has gone into them as to to think in the way that I think. That let's not define scales. That whether you're designing a bungalow or a knob or a handle or a chair or jewelry, there is a certain process. There is a certain way that we approach it. And we are very lucky that we have this backup of a workshop. So when there are things that are technical that we might not be able to sort out, there's always people that we just had a meeting before we started the presentation. We were trying to understand how certain things can be made. So yeah, I think what I said before also, the first slide, I think it is, you cannot limit your knowledge to schools, colleges, or institutes. That is, there's a theory, and when you have to apply it, you have to go work with the artisan. There is a balance that you have to find, which sort of will guide your work.
Okay. So on a project that involves everything, let's say architecture,
Hmm.
interior, furniture, uh,
Yeah.
how are the teams sort of organized? Is it that everybody comes together and does the brainstorming, or different people come as in when at different design stages you need their expertise?
Yeah, this is a structure or a way that I'm also trying to figure out, because we have always been very organic and also erratic. um, there's always been a certain madness about the studio, that that let us not define how to run a practice. Let us figure it out as it comes. So for every year there are new things. It's you have to constantly keep experimenting. So we decided on making teams to handle projects, and then I realized that no, I think let it be completely erratic. So I would give someone something, I would give someone something, and then it sort of comes out very well. That maybe I don't. So this year has been the year of self negation. So we're trying to escape our language, and it's very nice because then different thoughts come together, and then sort of it automatically gives so much value to the project because the underlying process is the same, and yet the interpretation is varied. So this is something that I decide very erratically, that okay, you've done this much, you stop now, I think someone else should do something, and something very interesting comes out of it.
Yeah. So at the moment, there is no structured sort of way in which you decide, but as in depending upon the kind of exploration that is going on, the team sort of comes together and works on a project.
Yeah. So we don't have like peons or clerks. We no accountants. All the whatever HR whatever. So we do the accounting. We take the orders. Like everything that happens or entails D&D is done by everyone here. So in the structure wise, it's me, and then there are three senior architects, and we have four interns. So between the three architects, it's sort of there is a time to pick up calls and take inquiries. There's a time to sit and work on drawings. There's so time to sort of ideate things. And like I said, that because we have not limited ourselves to a certain time, like after work hours when we don't get calls is the best time that we sit and discuss design, or we explore things that we need the meditative sort of time slot for.
Yeah. So talking about the influences, you talked about, that your father was an avid collector of antique
Hmm.
Indian furniture, and you actually started by studying all of that collection that was already there. And then you've also grown up in that Navsari, which has a kind of a
Yeah.
heritage with the Parsi beautiful vernacular architecture. You've also been traveling, and when I look at your material palette, particularly I'm talking more from now the interior and the furniture, not the architecture part of it. One
Hmm.
sees predominant use of, let's say, teak, brass, in certain combination with the
Yeah.
fabric, and at times mosaic terrazzo comes in, and all used in a very raw stage. So does that it's a kind of a search to find that kind of an Indianness, or the things that you had got from your childhood studies, or the memories that you have of the Indian studying the Indian antique furniture.
So I think that, and I think I just wrote somewhere that design cannot happen in isolation. So I see my practice, or I see me becoming everything as a continuous circle of life. So it's always the music you listen to, the art that you follow. There is a certain connection. Like I saw Satyajit Ray, sorry, Pather Panchali. I saw it in my first year of college, and I was like, what is this? I see it every year, and I realize the rawness of the characters. It is something so relatable to, say, a material like concrete. You know, and same, when you listen to Kumar Gandhar sing, his voice is very difficult to actually understand because he redefined classical music, where his voice is not something melodious or sweet. It is something that hits you. And so it's you have to define. And I think this I would say to everyone that there's no right or wrong in art. There's no right or wrong in any process. But for everything that you believe in, you should at least have a flow as to that if I come from this school of thought where I accept that the imperfections of concrete are something that is beautiful, and then I listen to a voice which is not very, probably I have liked all the films that everyone's hated. So you have to have a flow where you have a very critical mind about what appeals to you and what doesn't, and that will build your process, and then you'll be able to apply that in anything and everything that you do.
Yeah. So you're also a co-founder of another sort of a design studio, Pieces of Desire Pod,
Yeah.
where essentially you are working with the artisans. How
Hmm.
different that design process or is from the ones that you do at Design de Dukaan?
Yeah, design look, like I said, has been very erratic. So when we started Pod, we decided let's have some structure to the things you make. So predominantly, I have just been doing customized furniture, and when we started, no one was doing that level of customization. We never had like a collection that you could market and sell properly. I did not know business as such. I would just take everything that came my way and figure out a way around it. When I started Pod, I wanted to iron out all the mistakes, or maybe not the mistakes, but things that were left. Like, Design Look and the website we just launched last year. And we realized that after 10 years of practice, to collect data and to put it into a website is very difficult. So you have to start. There's a business works in a certain way. Also, so Nishita, she's also an architect. I'm also an architect. Collaborations are essential because they sort of complete the other person's complete what you're not. Like I have no business skills, and Nishita is very good with getting things done, being someone who's more sorted, someone who gets me in line. So it's something that balances out. So same thing that the process is the same, the skills are the same, we use the same workshop, but essentially a collaboration because it's not as idealistic as my practices. To sort of yeah.
Yeah. So you're trying to work with the artisans over there, and it's a different uh, uh, kind of a model. And you were talking about, you just said that that every furniture that you design, let's say if I look at it, is for a particular space in a certain context, and it's not something that can be taken in isolation.
Hmm.
So is it that all of these, particularly now I'm talking more about the furniture products, are they all meant to be bespoke, or is there, like, in over a period of time, there is some kind of a intention to develop a catalog by which it can be introduced as a product rather than a bespoke design?
So initially, all the projects we got were commissioned. So there was a context, there was an architect. They would give us a brief and you design around that.
Hmm.
Now that has become a part of a very big catalog, anyways. And then even now, I look up for challenges. I always tell architects, throw a challenge at me. Let me design something different. In fact, it's very nice that you say this. So December, Raw Collaborative is happening in Baroda. So we have never done any exhibitions for Design Dukan because that was never the intent. We did not know actually what the practice was about. But this year, so like I said, we are almost a community. So we have at least 70 people working with me as interns, architects, collaborators for the last 10 years. So selected few of us are working with different materials beyond just teak and brass, which is going to be like this. I always, how do you put it? So, this whatever 10 years of practice has culminated to the fact that we are still so close, even though they have their own practices and their own work, we are coming together to create this collection, which is completely beyond what we have done.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so that, yeah.
So there is basically a plan to uh, get some kind of a products, and which can be then, let's say, standardized, or which can be, let's say, promoted as a kind of a product. I mean, uh, what are the, let's say, some the future plans or aspirations when it comes to Design the Dukan?
This December, I'm looking forward to because I think I've given my life to this whole dream of building a community around design. It's coming together in tangible forms. Um, but I think for me personally, and also like I said, it's been a year of self negation. So I'm trying to challenge myself as a designer. Can you go beyond what you thought was right now? And with the new projects that we are doing right now, the material palette and the exploration is completely different. You might see nuances of the base of what you've done, but yet, like there are colors I would never use. It's beyond just teak and brass. And I think I feel like I'm at the point where, with what almost 10 years, 9, 10 years of practice, I think at this point I would want to sort of take a break and sort of rethink how to go forward. And we've just built a caravan. I could not put in the presentation, but for the same reason that I think as life gets faster, you must learn to slow down.
Thank you. I think Viram, we can sort of uh, there were some lot of glitches, and
Hmm.
we could not connect earlier, but
Yeah.
thankfully I think we've managed to pull up a very nice interview. And thank you for all the patience and all the time that you have given us today. And
Yep.
on behalf of our team here at ArchiDiaries and our viewers, I would like to thank you, your team, Design in Dukan, for being a part of this wonderful series that we have been going through. Thank you so much, Viram.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Yep.
So I'll just like to conclude this interview here with on a note that we just had our second interview of this series. We'll be having our next interview, which is scheduled next Tuesday, 6 p.m. same time. So I hope to see all of you back on that day. Thank you so much for joining with us on Archi Diaries. Thank you, Viram.
Yeah. Bye.